Well, the Bank of Canada hit the pause button for the second time, holding that policy rate steady at 2.75%. The question is, did the Bank of Canada make a mistake by not cutting when they had the chance? Did the Bank of Canada make a mistake? Are they really going to regret that in the months to come? We'll unpack that and more this week. Once again, welcome back to the channel. If you have not yet subscribed, we invite you to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Don't forget to leave your thoughts, questions, and concerns in the comment section below. Like and share the video. Let's try to get this content out to as many Canadians as possible. But right now, let's get right into it. So right now, I want to play a little game of remember back when in 2020, the Bank of Canada governor came out and sort of said, hey, look, we're going to keep interest rates lower for longer. So if you're a Canadian, go ahead. Go out there, purchase that home, purchase that cottage. Go ahead, get into a bigger house. Bank of Canada has your back. Now, ultimately, we know this is not news or not new news to many Canadians, unless you're just getting into the real estate market and you've lived under a rock for the last little while. But ultimately, the Bank of Canada governor did give that forward guidance. Now, speaking of forward guidance, let's fast forward to 2025 right now, where the Bank of Canada had gone on a 7-rate consecutive cut, where they cut that policy rate all the way down to where we are today. Now, ultimately, the Bank of Canada has hit that pause button for the second time. And I think, yes, there's definitely reason that the Bank of Canada could pause, but did they miss the mark and will they have to play a game of catch up in the months to come? Now, listening to the press conference over the last few years, obviously paying very close attention to the nuances, what the Bank of Canada governor is saying, what they're not saying, is super important. I mean, even the questions that are being asked to the governor basically give us a lot of insight on what they could be thinking. Now, once again, this is not a science. I mean, this is literally just projections, forecasting, but like many economists, many Bank of Canada representatives, many people looking, at the Bank of Canada are wondering, saying, hey, I mean, where are you really seeing all of this positivity? I mean, the Canadian economy isn't really as resilient as you state it is. Now, you might be saying, Anthony, wait a minute. GDP came in at 2.2% for the first quarter. I mean, that's huge. Nobody expected 2.2%. I mean, that's showing us that the Canadian economy, we're shipping goods. All things are firing potentially better than expected, right? Well, that's obviously something that we need to understand as an anomaly. We've talked about on the channel before, and it's super important to basically recap that and go back and say, look, remember in November when Donald Trump got elected or basically won the presidency, we knew that tariffs were going to come in. Fast forward January 20th, we knew that these tariffs were going to be a real threat, or at least many businesses did. And then back in February, we got the initial threat. And obviously now we're waffling back and forth, tariffs at this, tariffs for them, reciprocal tariffs here. But at the end of the day, those GDP numbers that we saw in Canada was basically the exporting for Canadians, right? So what manufacturing sectors that are selling to the United States, a lot of that was front run. I mean, those orders were put in, talked to a lot of people manufacturing. As soon as that stuff was coming through, they were rushing to try to fill these orders in the first quarter. And right now, everything basically fell off a cliff. So the GDP, the growth numbers that are going to be coming in the future are going to be nowhere close to where we are right now or what we saw right now. Remember, all those are backwards looking indicators. They're not forward looking indicators. On top of that, yes, we have inflation. I mean, there's no arguing. Inflation is the biggest concern for the Bank of Canada, and rightfully so. People that are going to the grocery store, the marginalized, those living paycheck to paycheck, feel it the most. So of course, yes, we don't want inflation to tick up, especially with the core, medium, and trim. Those numbers are getting a little bit alarming. We talked about it last week. When we see those numbers tick up, well, the Bank of Canada is going to be paying very close attention to it. But if you take a step back and ask yourself the question, well, hold on a minute. Well, Canada is obviously engaging in reciprocal tariffs. Well, Canada had an option not to retaliate in order to prevent those inflationary problems. Even the Bank of Canada governor at the press conference was sort of talking around, beating around the bush, saying...
Something of a follow-up on Paul's question, Governor. You said in your statement that you could be persuaded to lower rates going forward if inflation remains contained. What does contained mean? Is that contained at current levels, or do you need to see inflation come off a bit?
Well, I know you'd like us to give you like one number. Here it is. That's a line in the sand. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty. We're being less forward-looking. We still need to be forward-looking. So yeah, we're going to look and see. I mean, I think the big message here is, look, the Canadian economy is showing some resilience to tariffs. Yes, consumption was softer in the first quarter. You can see the impact of tariffs on consumption. But despite a really big drop in consumer confidence, consumer spending did continue to grow in the first quarter. Business investment was actually a bit stronger than we expected in the first quarter. So, you can definitely see the impact of tariffs, but there is some resilience. Having said that, look, the longer these tariffs go on, the longer this uncertainty goes on, the more it's going to weigh on the Canadian economy, the more that is going to put downward pressure on inflation, and we will be watching that very carefully. But we are also conscious that there are cost effects of tariffs. We're seeing that already. The trade disruption, I mean, what we're hearing from firms is that the trade disruption is already adding costs. They're looking for new suppliers. They're developing new markets. That's adding costs. And the retaliatory tariffs that put in place, that is not in the yet in the CPI data that we have. You will see that start to come in the months ahead. So we will be looking at both those things. And as I discussed in the opening statement, in our deliberations, we did talk about the future path, and the Governing Council thought that there could be a need for a further reduction in the interest rate if the tariffs continue, if that creates more weakness in the Canadian economy, and if the cost pressures coming through in inflation are contained. I wouldn't interpret that as forward guidance. That was part of our deliberations, nothing more, nothing less. The only forward guidance we can give you really is as I've already indicated, given the unusual level of uncertainty, we are proceeding carefully, and what that means is that we're being less forward-looking than usual.
So the biggest threat is these tariffs, the increase in inflationary pressures, right? So if we know that the Bank of Canada is going to be tackling inflation, why would the Canadian government sort of say, hey, you know what, we should reciprocate? And I do agree. Look, as I said, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. At the end of the day, Canada needs to retaliate, but there's different measures, different ways that we could do it. And the same sense is that I believe the Canadian government is the one that is causing this inflation. Even though, yes, the US started the war with this trade war stuff, at the end of the day, Canada has to look out for its own people and say, look, things are going to get more expensive. We're going to get inflation. We have a high debt crisis. We have a huge problem with housing. We have more people, obviously, in the country, less housing, arguably. All these continual problems, we'll get into that in just a moment. Why are we going to increase the tariff fear? I mean, ultimately, I think the government now, the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. Now, speaking, just to shift gears, obviously the Bank of Canada and their council and the deputy governor, obviously these are really smart intellectual minds, but this is really the problem. I don't think the Bank of Canada understands or sees the fact that, look, once things get really, really bad, it's going to be a game of catch up. So we know this because, look, the Bank of Canada missed the mark. I mean, look, all these great minds, they missed the mark on the way up, but they could have caught inflation when it wasn't transitory, when we started to have all these issues back in 2021, but they didn't. So maybe they're missing the mark now. Who knows, right? I'm just trying to point out the obvious, at least for me, it's obvious. Maybe let me know if it's obvious to you. But looking at things right now, the housing market, we have more inventory coming on the market. We have less buyers in the market. Sentiment is pretty bad. I mean, let's face it. Not many people are going to want to go out there and buy a house if they're not sure about their job, they're not sure about the economy, or they're not sure, hey, if I buy a house today, is it going to drop another 10, 15%? I mean, that's really the question. Then on top of that, you have all these construction workers. I believe this is the canary in the coal mine. I mean, employment's at 6.9%. Where do we need it to go? 8% before the Bank of Canada says, hey, we should start cutting rates to stimulate the economy a lot sooner. And then by that point, remember, everything works on a lag. It takes 3, 6, 12, 18 months for all these rate cuts to sort of bleed into the system. we started cutting back in 2024 into 2025, but those take time, right? Those take time to work their way into the system. Ultimately, right now, I don't know what the real answer is, but I do believe personally, if we get employment ticking up, GDP numbers fall off a cliff, those inflation numbers, which are caused by potentially the higher cost of tariffs, the goods that are coming in from the United States that Canada imposed, they could have done something differently. Obviously, we need to buy Canadian. Let's not get into all this other political stuff, but at the end of the day, I think the Bank of Canada made a big mistake. Maybe they're going to have to cut 0.5% in July, or maybe they're going to hold in July. Maybe in September they're going to cut 0.5%. Maybe they're not going to cut it all. I mean, all of this has to do with tariff uncertainty, what is happening with the future of the Canadian economy. And I can tell you right now firsthand, and if you look at Equifax, you look at the headlines right now, a lot of Canadians are missing their credit card payments, car payments. Mortgage delinquencies are slightly on the rise. Yes, we have more people entering the country. We had way more people, about 3 million over the last couple of years come into Canada. So, those numbers are going to be a little bit more impacted than they were just a little while ago. But remember, these are some of the symptoms. These are some of the signals that the Bank of Canada needs to pay close attention to. The data will speak a lot, and they won't give us any forward guidance. Bank of Canada is not giving any forward guidance. They're just saying, look, we're data dependent, but we're not looking that much into the future. We're going to be really concentrating on what's happening right now. So at the end of the day, do you think the Bank of Canada made a mistake? Am I onto something? Did I miss something? Let me know in the comment sections below. But until next week, thanks again for stopping by. We'll see you next time.